Lancia is no stranger to rallying, and they've made some amazing cars over the many years that they've been around. From their heritage and technical innovations, from the Stratos, the Fulvia, and even the Delta, these cars have been amazing in rallying and motorsport. But why are they not on the road enough, and what has happened to Lancia since? Let's look into Lancia and how they've been such an amazing company and petrolhead heaven for a lot of people. This is the story of those icons. Now, today's world of rallying is definitely really exciting, dominated by four main brands, as you can see, and they were really fun to watch, and there's a lot of great action all the time. But back in 1970s in Turin, Lancia decided to become a bit more powerful in the force of rallying and motorsport, and it's not quite like the cars they make today. Following its withdrawal from Formula 1 in 1955, Lancia decided to get into rallying as its motorsport heritage, and they definitely dominated here, but it didn't happen straight away. In the early 1960s, they started to race the Fulvia, and it was a really successful car, over time producing more and more power, and becoming 8th place in the Tour de Course overall. Over that time period, in the next 5 years, they decided to increase the engine with V4 engines and limited one to 1.6 litre V4s, and it was very successful in its place, with more power than any other cars. The car as a prototype until 1969 was raced, and it was an FIA homologation. In the 1970s, Fulvias won all Italian rally championships and continued to do so for the next 3 years. Competitors such as the Porsche 911 and the Alpine A110 were in its way when it came to driving in the 60s and 70s, and these were really powerful, big industry cars that were well known in rallying for their ability to destroy everything else on its competition. So Lancia coming in with a fairly normal people's car was almost kind of absurd at the time. But I have to say, I really think the Lancia Fulvia is a beautiful engine and well-designed car. I'd love to own a Lancia Fulvia in the future. It's absolutely fantastic, and they started the ball running. And so with the 60s behind us and the 70s rolling in, Lancia decided to retire the Fulvia for the Lancia Stratos HF, an iconic design. It was a rare mid-engined sports car, and it was one of the most successful rally cars, winning championships in 1974, 5 and 76. It took inspiration from the Bertone weird concept car, as you can see here, and it 5 times won a Tour de France automobile and 3 editions of the Guerriera d'Italia Automobilistico. It was very rare, and only 492 of these cars were only ever produced. It had a weird transverse mid-engined sort of design, and it was unique, for as far as I know, from any other car, and it's still unique for that reason in racing games. It did very well over this period, and it had a lot of prototypes, and a lot of people made replicas of this car, so it was one of those that is very inspirational. And the replicas were done well, very similar to the Shelby Cobra 427, in which it cost £1 million to buy. However, there are newer models today, and they are almost just as nice, but this car costs a whopping £500,000, according to some of the sources, and does have Ferrari parts, as you can see here, at almost 500k.
No! God, please, no! No!
Frustrating for anyone who wants one, but it is a rally icon, and it seems like it was only ever built for rallying, so they had to produce road cars. It didn't stop there for Lancia in their rallying sports heritage. They decided to retire the Stratos after only a few years in rallying and bring out the 037. The 037, also known as the Lancia Abarth, and it was a mid-engine sports car again built by Lancia, which competed in Group B rallying. Yes, Group B rallying, which is extremely savage, with even the Porsche 959 competing at this stage. Driven by Marco Allen, Attilio Bettega and Walter Roll, they knew how to drive this car. It is one of the most amazing rally cars that came out of this period, and it was the last rear-wheel drive car to win a WRC. It was very successful, but as you can see here, very little were made. And in fact, it's not quite known how many were made in the case of Lancia, as they never really announced it. And it was probably around 200, but that doesn't necessarily count for road cars, so it could have been a bit more. One of the most beautiful cars and iconic in racing games as well. As you can see, these cars, if you were to buy one, it's really difficult to find any kind of price on it. But here I found one for around £674,000, which is insane money.
Wow.
Although this is probably to be expected from one of the greatest rally cars in history, and rarest as well. As the 80s rolled in mid-1985, the Delta HF was born along with the S4. Both of these cars came out at separate times, which is where I want to start with the S4. It actually began with the original success of the HF Turbo, which was a very successful road car for Lancia, and they made thousands and thousands. And it adopted over this time as a bigger and more aggressive car. But I want to start with the S4 because this is where the S4 was actually born, before the HF four-wheel drive. The S4 was born in around 1985 after some criticisms of the original Delta being a little bit too lacking on equipment, and they needed to make a bit more of an aggressive and a more powerful luxury version in a sense. But it didn't really become that. It actually became a Group B rally car, which was eventually banned from the competition for being so powerful and winning pretty much every race sanctioned by the F-body FIA. The car was replaced of an evolution of the 037, and the S4 took full advantage of the Group B regulations and featured a midship mounted engine for all-wheel drive superior traction. It took a total of 28 complete chassis were manufactured, and it's a very, very rare car to even see. Very popular in games such as Dirt 5 Rally and even Forza Horizon. You might even recognise this car. It had a 1700cc engine which had a supercharger, and it produced around 480 horsepower. It won many rallies in this time and was considered again another rallying legend by Lancia. And finally, to finish things off, the Delta HF forward-wheel drive, also known as Integrale in some sectors, was a 1995cc twin-cam 8-valve engine, which dominated the rally scene again after the success of the Delta S4. The Delta HF was again shown as a rally car to prove that Lancia were in charge of all rally, and it was one of the most successful four-wheel drive cars of this time. It was seen as potentially an incredible icon of rally in the late 80s, and the road cars were very successful. There's around 40,000 Deltas, so they're not as rare, but some of the Integrale final editions are worth so much money you would not believe. So those are the 4 rally icons that Lancia created for rallying history, and icons that we haven't seen since. As for Lancia today, they make these sort of cars, smaller city cars, and they work really well in Italy, but it's unknown whether they'll ever make anything like these again. Hope you've enjoyed this Cars with Ben video. Don't forget to subscribe if you like car content.